So I just saw Stranger Things 3 and it was disappointing to say the least. I think the overarching theme of this season was lazy writing that takes you out of the show and into your inner monologue trying to decipher what the hell is happening. Now that's not to say that Stranger Things 3 is the worst thing ever made, because it's actually okay. But if you compare it to season 1, the cracks become wildly apparent. The first season was well paced, the story and plot were tight, and the characters felt like real people with baggage and motivations going through a high stakes situation. Stranger Things 3 was a cartoon version of the first one. You can tell it was written by different people who are trying to make these episodes based on what they remember of the first season. So it feels more like a satire where the writers don't fully grasp the essence of the show or what made it great.
Oh, Jesus Christ, whatever happened to standards?
For those of you who have watched Stranger Things 3 and still think it's as good as the first season, go back and watch the original and I guarantee you'll get what I'm talking about. When I first saw the show, I can rattle off a lot of different reasons for why I didn't like it that were consequences of lazy writing. They introduced elements for convenience and never resolved them. They relied too heavily on uninteresting, repetitive, and under-choreographed fight scenes to add any sort of tension to the plot. There was way too much overt product placement.
Sweeter, bolder, better.
There was just a litany of issues that reared their heads. And then I realized that even with all those plot contrivances, this season would still be watchable for me if I liked the characters. But I didn't. The people I was watching on screen weren't the dynamic, fleshed-out underdogs I once knew. They were strangers. And strangers I didn't like watching, which is the strangest thing of all. During the earlier seasons, I developed a bond with a lot of the characters. Elle was adorable but strong, Hopper was distant but protective, Steve and Dustin were charismatic, and Winona Ryder seemed like someone plopped Winona Ryder into the show and didn't tell her it was fake. Talk to me! I know you're here! Sure, Mike, Lucas, and Will were kind of uninteresting, but not every character can be the best character. But everyone devolved in Stranger Things 3. It's like the writers took the worst parts of each person and turned them up to 11. No pun intended.
Put it up to 11.
11, exactly.
And it's not like in other shows where sometimes the characters are terrible, but their bad traits bounce off each other in a cohesive, complementary way that heightens the entertainment value, like in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. In Stranger Things 3, their worst traits are too similar and clash like socks and sandals. Instead of talking in generalities, let's go through the groups in the season and look at their flaws. Starting off with the gaggle of teenagers, Mike, 11, Will, Lucas, and Max. These kids are pretty much high schoolers that think that being over the top makes them cool. They give you the sense that they know everything about everything and constantly yap about nothing of real value without any sort of range. I think the people who wrote these scenes have only interacted with stereotypical whiny teenagers because that's what this group is channeling. It's very much like you're observing a group of stuck-up 15-year-olds who think they're better than you while also throwing a monster into the mix.
What's wrong?
The acting is also not great, and it doesn't help that they cast most of these teens when they were young and cute. In the earlier seasons, they weren't necessarily bad actors, but they were able to react to what the director threw at them.
Hello, this is Mike Wheeler, president of Hawkins Middle AV Club.
Kind of like how Macaulay Culkin used to be a good enough child actor because he was adorable and could imitate people good enough. But just like Macaulay Culkin as he got older, come Stranger Things 3, these kids did not age well, and now that they're older, they have to act. And turns out they're not as good as I wish they were.
I know. Me too. But I'll see you tomorrow, all right?
They're just kind of awkward teenagers. Look at it this way. If they were casting Stranger Things 3 now, they definitely would not pick these guys out of a group. But since they got them when they were young, they kind of have to keep them around. The only good performers out of this group in particular is maybe Millie Bobby Brown and definitely the girl who plays Max. While the other kids seem like they're in a high school play, Max is believable and pretty much carries the storyline.
The way that you frame that is such bullshit.
It's not bullshit, Mike. This is your whole problem, and it's also precisely the reason why she dumped your ass.
At this point, I'd like to take a moment to talk about 11. In this season, she alternates between being a socially inept girl that's learning about the world for the first time and someone who can speak fluently and understands everything, which is highly confusing.
You lie. I make my own rules.
And also, am I the only one that thinks that Mike and 11 dating is weird? This girl was essentially raised in the closet for 12 years, and according to the timeline of the show, has only been in the real world for about a year or two. She's never gone to school or interacted with anybody outside of the Stranger Things crowd. And the first thing Mike does is pull this stunted child into a romantic roller coaster. And she doesn't even know what roller coasters are.
You know when you drop on a roller coaster?
Sure. Yeah. No.
Leave her alone, Mike. Give her time to live her life before you take her captive. She's a child, not your relationship doll. Moving on, Hopper and Joyce. These guys have one note, and that note is
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Oh, this? Not a lover's quarrel, pal.
Shut up!
In Stranger Things 3, Hopper is a needy, spoiled child, and Winona Ryder is just Winona Ryder. They refuse to have civil conversation, and it takes away from the seriousness of the situation. They get things done and progress the plot on their end of the story, but not without barking at each other like rabid demigorgons.
No, you've outdone yourself.
Oh, come on, Hop, you're not even listening to me.
These are the responsible adults in the series, not children, yet they make the most stupid, backwards decisions in the whole series, like yelling at the US military over the phone when they need their help.
When I hang up, you're gonna get up off your ass and you're gonna go find Owen and tell him what's going on.
Stopping for slushies when they're being chased by a Russian assassin. Giving the Russian scientist they abducted a full-out chance to escape even though he was their one lead to resolving their problem. Or yelling at each other in English while sneaking into a Russian bunker pretending to be Russian guards. Granted, none of these decisions had any consequences because the story demanded as such, but it's incredibly infuriating to watch the two most relatable and down-to-earth people in the entire series morph to act against their own interests. On a related note, looking just at Winona Ryder in the first 2 seasons, she was great because her role was as a panicked mother trying to save her baby. But in this, she isn't a panicked mother. She's a crazy person with crazy eyes scared something is happening to her magnets, and it's incredibly unnerving.
I think you're kind of overdoing it with the crazy part.
I know what I saw, and I'm not crazy.
Next group, Steve and Dustin. Steve, Dustin, and their crew have the most watchable storyline in the entire season. They have chemistry and mutual respect, and their dynamic is interesting to watch.
How many children are you friends with?
However, they also have the comic relief plotline, which means it seems like they were given a lot of moments to stop and tell jokes. In those moments, the tension and seriousness of whatever's happening dissipates into the upside down. Like the time when Steve and his friend take a couple of minutes to talk about their lives in a bathroom while being chased by Russian soldiers.
Are you still in love with Nancy?
No.
Why not?
Or when the show takes a break at the height of the climax so Dustin and his girlfriend can romantically sing the whole Never-Ending Story theme song.
The answer to a never-ending story.
Moving on again, Nancy and Jonathan. They're just there. There's nothing to say about them. They act boring for a couple of minutes per episode and drive around. Sometimes they'll transport the kids, but that's it. They're present from the main monster fight, but nothing extravagant happens. Funny enough, I read the first draft of this script, the one that I'm reading to you guys right now, to somebody the other day, and they noted that I forgot to include Nancy Drew and What's-His-Face in the dark room. That's how unremarkable these characters are.
You really are your mother's son, you know that?
What's that supposed to mean?
It means you worry too much.
Group change, Billy. The actor who played Billy was wasted. And not like drunk, he was highly underutilized. He was one of the best performers and most interesting characters in season 2. He had the potential to have such a satisfying redemption arc like Steve in the first season, or could have been used as a captivating villain. But instead of fleshing him out and using him effectively, they made him a possessed puppet with no motivation that was really just a robot the whole time. Those moments where Billy pulls through the Mind Flayer's possession and reacts to his situation were so powerful.
I've done things, Max, really bad things. I didn't mean to.
I would have liked to see more scenes like that, where the actor was allowed to be Billy and not a supernatural monster in human clothes. Last group change, Alexei and Murray. I'm really not going to dwell on these characters because they were kind of a footnote on the already mammoth cast of people in this season, but these guys were great. I loved how at first they hated each other because Alexei was a Russian scientist and Murray was a crazy American in the 80s, but in the end they were able to bond because of their similarities and love of television and food and all those things. It was a love story in itself, and it was just really fun to watch. I wish there was more of that.
Он смелый. Прям как толстый Рэмбо.
He says he likes your courage. You remind him of a fat Rambo.
In summation, Stranger Things 3 wasn't great, and I blame that on the character rating. In all, I'd give it a 5.5 out of 10 because it's half of 11, pun intended. If you liked the first 2 seasons of Stranger Things, maybe you like this season more than I did, but I just really hope the 4th one is better. If anyone who writes Stranger Things is watching this, here are my suggestions on what you can possibly do to elevate the show.
The future is in the past. Onward, Sayoshiba!
1. Cut down the amount of people. It feels like the show is constantly bringing in major characters but never really gets rid of anyone, and it's kind of messy. I know they quote-unquote killed off Hopper in the last episode of season 3, but he's obviously coming back, especially when you consider the end scene in the Russian bunker.
Не американцы.
Maybe next season get rid of the less strong characters like Mike. That specifically could be a good way to advance Elle's story and just reduce the clutter in the show. Once you remove those weaker characters, number 2, focus on the most interesting people. The cast of Stranger Things is a mixed bag of boring and interesting. In the next season, the story could fully revolve around the best people they have. You don't need Lucas, Nancy, Jonathan, or Mike. Pick an interesting focal group and focus on those relationships, like Steve and Dustin's group, or maybe just Hopper if they bring him back to who he was in season 1 and 2. And number 3, bring back Billy. There were so many missed opportunities with him that I would love to see explored. To the people who write Stranger Things who may be watching this video, it's your show. You have the power to bring people back. So please, bring Billy back. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.